A silent epidemic once swept through medieval Europe, but its victims had 4 legs and whiskers. This is the story of a deadly historical mystery, a mass panic that led to the systematic extermination of cats across a continent. By the end, you will understand how a single superstition triggered a chain reaction of unimaginable suffering. We will uncover why an entire society turned against its feline protectors and what terrifying price they paid for that fear. What we believe is the most dangerous force in human history. To understand the panic, we must first step into the world these cats inhabited. This was the High Middle Ages, a period stretching from the 13th to the 14th century. Europe was a patchwork of kingdoms and principalities where life for most people was tied to the land. In villages and towns, homes were simple, food stores were precious, and darkness held real terrors. In this world, the common house cat was not merely a companion. It was a vital working member of the household, a silent guardian against a far more tangible threat than any demon. Rodents were a constant plague, invading grain stores and spreading disease. The cat's value as a mouser was beyond question, a practical partnership between human and animal that had endured for centuries. Yet alongside this practical role, older, darker beliefs simmered just beneath the surface. Since ancient times, cats had been creatures of mystery. Their nocturnal habits, their uncanny eyes that seemed to capture the moonlight, and their silent, graceful movements lent them an air of otherworldliness. In some folk traditions, they were seen as good luck, but in others, they were viewed with deep suspicion as familiars of witches or omens of bad fortune. This superstition was a slow-burning fuse, waiting for a spark. That spark came from a climate of intense religious fear. The church was the central power of medieval life, and the 13th century was a time of crusades against external enemies and fierce internal purges of heresy. One such targeted group was the Cathars, a Christian sect in southern France deemed heretical for their beliefs. In this atmosphere of suspicion, any unusual practice could be twisted into evidence of devil worship. And in 1233, Pope Gregory IX provided the official match for the fuse. He issued a papal bull, a formal decree, titled Vox in Rama, which described the alleged rituals of the Cathars in horrific detail. Within this text was a fateful passage. It claimed that during their secret ceremonies, heretics would kiss the backside of a black cat, which was in reality the devil himself in disguise. With a single document, a powerful superstition was given the full weight of holy sanction. The black cat, and by fearful extension all cats, were no longer just mysterious animals. They were now officially linked to heresy, to Satan, and to a secret war against the Christian world. The tinderbox of medieval society was primed. All it needed was for someone to light the flame. The papal decree was a declaration of war, but it was old folk beliefs that provided the army. Across Europe, the cat's natural behaviors, once simply puzzling, were now read as proof of a diabolical contract. Their independence, a trait we might admire today, was seen as a refusal to submit to God's natural order, a sign of allegiance to a darker master. Their glowing eyes in the dark were not a biological adaptation, but hellfire burning within. Their silent nocturnal prowling was not hunting for mice, but spying for witches or carrying out malicious errands. This fear crystallized around the concept of the familiar, a spirit or demon that served a witch as a companion and assistant. And what better form for such a creature to take than that of a common, inconspicuous house cat? It was the perfect disguise. A black cat curling by the hearth was no longer a pet. It was a spy in the home, a conduit for evil. Specific, terrifying accusations became commonplace. People believed witches could shapeshift into cats to move unseen, slipping through cracks to eavesdrop on private conversations or steal the breath from sleeping infants. Tales spread of cats gathering in the woods at night, not for any feline purpose, but to attend the witches' Sabbath, a blasphemous parody of religious ceremony presided over by Satan himself. Even a neighbor's misfortune could be blamed on a cat. If a farmer's cow sickened or a child fell ill, a suspicious glance might fall on the old woman who lived alone with her several feline companions. Those cats were thought to be the instruments of her curse. This demonization did not remain a rural superstition. It was absorbed and amplified by the church, moving from whispered village legend to a point of mainstream doctrine. Priests preached about the dangers of these demonic familiars. Theological texts cited their existence. The cat, an animal living in millions of European homes, was systematically recast in the public imagination as a vessel of pure malevolence. It was no longer a creature of God's creation, but a creature of the devil's design. This created a state of holy terror in everyday life, transforming the familiar into the profoundly frightening. The family Mauser was now a potential enemy within the walls. This pervasive fear created a permission structure for violence, a belief that destroying a cat was not an act of cruelty, but an act of piety, a blow struck against the devil's own army. And when true terror arrived from an unexpected direction, that permission would be acted upon with horrifying speed. The permission to kill became a festival of death. Across towns and villages, the fear of cats transformed into a public spectacle, a communal ritual to purge evil. This was not the work of a few isolated individuals, but organized, town-sanctioned violence. One of the most infamous traditions was the Kattenstoot or Cat Festival in the city of Ypres in what is now Belgium. Here, live cats were ceremonially thrown from the city's high belfry tower onto the cobblestone square below, to the cheers of the gathered crowd. It was seen as a way to drive out demons and ensure a good harvest, a brutal tradition that persisted for centuries. But Ypres was not alone. In France, cats were burned alive in massive wicker baskets during the Midsummer Festival of St. John, their agonized cries believed to ward off witchcraft and misfortune. In other places, they were drowned in sacks, beaten or hunted through the streets by mobs. The killings were often scheduled, public, and treated as a form of civic duty. Imagine the scene, a town square filled with families, not in horror but in a festive mood, the air thick with smoke from bonfires, the sound of jeers and celebration, drowning out the terrified sounds of the animals. This normalization was perhaps the most chilling aspect. By making the extermination a public holiday, medieval society removed the stigma of cruelty. It was not murder, it was purification. A parent might bring a child to watch, teaching them that this was how you protected your home from Satan's influence. The scale of this centuries-long purge is almost impossible to comprehend, but historians estimate that millions of cats were systematically killed across Europe. Entire generations of felines were wiped out. In cities and on farms, the diligent Mausers that had safeguarded food supplies for generations simply vanished. The ecosystem of every community was violently disrupted. The primary predator of rats and mice was gone, and the consequences of that vacuum were not immediately understood. People felt safer, believing they had defeated a spiritual enemy. They had no idea they had just disarmed their most effective defense against a far more tangible and far deadlier foe. The silence left by the missing cats would soon be filled by a scurrying, multiplying horror. The silence left by the missing cats was soon broken by the sound of scurrying in the walls. With their natural predators systematically wiped out, rat populations exploded across the continent. This was not just a nuisance, it was an ecological catastrophe in slow motion. The primary beneficiary was the black rat, a species that thrived in the very human environments now devoid of feline patrols. These rats nested in thatched roofs, burrowed into grain stores, and multiplied at an astonishing rate, utterly unchecked. They were more than just thieves of food, they were carriers. Each rat was a bustling metropolis for fleas, and one particular flea, Xenopsilla chiopes, carried a deadly bacterial passenger, Yersinia pestis. This was the recipe for the Black Death. When merchant ships from the east arrived in Sicilian ports in 1347, they carried more than silks and spices. They carried infected rats and their fleas. The disease found a Europe perfectly prepared for its ravages. Towns were densely populated, sanitation was poor, and crucially, the first line of defense against the rodent carriers was gone. The cats had been the barrier. A healthy population of working cats would have culled the rats, disrupted their movements, and slowed the spread of the fleas from rodent to rodent, and ultimately from rodent to human. That barrier had been torn down by fear and superstition. Now the plague found a superhighway. The result was history's most devastating pandemic. The Black Death swept through Europe with terrifying speed and brutality. It manifested in several forms, the most common being the bubonic plague, named for the painful, swollen lymph nodes or buboes that appeared in the groin, armpits, and neck. Victims suffered high fevers, chills, and delirium, with death often following within a week. The disease did not discriminate, claiming the lives of peasants, merchants, priests, and nobles alike. Within just a few years, it is estimated that 1/3 of Europe's population, roughly 25 million people, perished. Entire villages were wiped off the map, the social and economic order was shattered, and a deep trauma was etched into the collective memory of a continent. To be clear, the extermination of cats was not the sole cause of the Black Death. The bacterium existed, trade routes spread it, and medieval living conditions were ripe for infection. But the mass killing of cats was a critical, self-inflicted wound that turned a tragedy into a catastrophe. By eliminating the primary predator of the plague's host animal, medieval society had unknowingly rolled out a red carpet for the pandemic. They had traded an imagined demon for a very real, microscopic one. The haunting question lingers: how many of those 25 million souls might have been spared if the cats had been left to do their silent, essential work? The panic that killed the cats did not end with their deaths, it merely set the stage for a far greater dying. The plague's devastation was the final, horrifying link in a chain forged by fear. It began with a papal decree that branded the cat a demon, a spark that ignited centuries of deep superstition. That superstition curdled into mass hysteria, transforming public festivals into rituals of extermination. This created an ecological vacuum, a world without predators where rats could thrive unchallenged, and those rats, carrying fleas infected with plague, delivered the ultimate tragic blow. The very panic meant to purge evil from society had in fact invited a biological nightmare of unimaginable scale. The greatest irony is that the people of medieval Europe, in their desperate quest for spiritual safety, destroyed the creature that offered them a very real physical protection. They scapegoated the innocent, and the entire continent paid the price in suffering and death. This story is more than a historical curiosity. It is a stark lesson in unintended consequences. It reminds us that fear is a poor guide for action, especially when it leads us to disrupt the delicate balances in the world around us, balances we may not even fully understand. The medieval war on cats shows how a society can become the architect of its own calamity, blinded by belief to the true sources of danger. What other moments in history can you think of where a society's fears led to disastrous, unforeseen results? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to explore more of history's strangest and most consequential mysteries, be sure to subscribe.